Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi there once again, welcome to another Lemon Amiga play guide and review. In this week's show we'll be taking a look again at Moonshine Racers, developed by Peakstar Software and published by Millennium in April 1991.
Those darn moonshiners are at it again!
Following our Amiga top 50 racing games of all time may remember that this was number 50, and I promised to review this sometime this series. So whilst you see some credits that I created for this game, and I'm not quite sure whether those credits were meant to be in this game, but you can see I've overlaid some graphics there. But what we're going to do is actually play this for as far as we can, and I have not practiced or rehearsed this as usual. We'll just play the game through and see how far we go. After the introduction animation, we will be presented by the most basic title screen ever imagined, and that was probably bettered on a BBC Micro. But if we press any key or press the fire button, that will actually take us on to the game itself.
Hey there, I'm Ike. Watching out for Fat Sam the Sheriff is a full-time job. Hey there, I'm Ike's cousin Billy Joe. Watch me put the pedal to the metal and set that moonshine for Tucker's bar.
Yeah, that's right, you guessed it. I'm Mike's dog and Scraps. I sure hate that Fat Sam and his mutt.
Hey, I'm Tucker, the moonshine boss. I'll give the best rate going for any moonshine coming my way.
I'm known as Fat Sam the Sheriff. Don't mess with that moonshine, boy.
Hi, I'm Petula. I keep my dad, the sheriff, in touch about any trouble brewing.
And I'm Rommel, the sheriff's dog. I eat moonshiners for breakfast.
From the high score table, we can see that there are at least 14 stages in this game, and all I have to do is press that fire button to be moved on to the first one. In this rally game, all we have to do is to move a load of alcohol from A to B, and if we manage to do that ahead of other racers, then we'll get the top prize. At the end of the race, we can then upgrade our vehicle, and we can expand our ride. But for the moment, the important part is to get that moonshine along, and of course we start off in the basic crate, and that thing only shuffles along that road, and you can see at these speeds the graphics don't exactly wow the player with their amazing refresh rate.
Don't set fire to my moonshine, boys.
You can see in the bottom corner we have a basic 2-stage gearbox, just like Outrun, but like Outrun you'll find that the game does not run as quickly or as smoothly as that game, but what we do have are a variety of landscape changes from level to level, and sometimes from stage to stage as well. On the very left you can see a thermometer, and that's actually the accumulated damage, and every time that we bump anything in the road, whether it's a pit in the ground or one of these boulders or some of this tumbleweed, we'll take damage, and that will go down slowly as the engine cools down, but too many collisions will make that damage fire through the roof. In order to cool down the engine, you can always gear down into first gear, but unfortunately you can see we've just been passed by another great driver. Sometimes it's great and fun to jump over obstacles in that road, and sometimes that road just throws you off just like you are the obstacle, and you may notice that the driver in this case stays bang in the centre of that road, and the road simply shifts left and right along that screen. Number 1 under the clock, that means we made it into first, and we deliver our wares in first, which gives us the maximum score and the maximum cash, and that teleports us into the shop in this game. And in the shop, just like all your favourite racers, you can actually upgrade with turbos and nitros and engines and tyres, as well as fairy dice and some other bits and pieces. But you can see that the engine, the main block, is actually split into 2 halves, and that won't actually work great unless you buy both of those halves, and so buying things on the cheap in this game isn't amazingly recommended. It's better to save your cash and to buy things all together, and that will really boost your performance. At the moment I have 100 cash, which isn't really enough for a great deal, but it is enough for some tyres, and if I can't afford anything at this point, I'm probably more likely to go for the tyres, and some of those are quite fancy. You can see that we can upgrade to fairy dice and even a special charger with ramrod action, and also we can buy a map as well, which doesn't really do much but flashes out the auto map in the game. And you can see effects in the top corner. We can also switch on and off the music and the sound effects from the screen as well. But for now, let's just afford ourselves a set of tyres. Front tyres or rear tyres will cost $75, which leaves $25 in reserve. Let's take that on to the next level. Each level begins with a brand new landscape, brand new colour schemes and brand new horizons, as well as clouds that you can see on that horizon, which revolve in parallax. And you can see that the graphics details on offer are great and are presented in high res, so it isn't the fact that this game had too little to do, it probably had less optimization as to why this game is quite jerky, particularly with these slow speed, low power cars. So if you can call this thing a car, it's certainly a vehicle, and we seem to be blowing it up at the moment. But you probably can get away with one blow up on every level and still get to that checkpoint if you manage to avoid all these things. And sometimes you can plan a route and take the inside, and the road will simply take you over to the other side, and so sometimes it's luck over judgment. And sometimes jumping over those gaps is great luck, because sometimes you'll plough straight into those, and that makes this game fairly easy. You can see we are in position 1, and all this other slow traffic simply bumps us into the cops.
Watch the road! It's all your fault!
You boys had enough? I got your usual shell ready.
The engine's on fire, Billy!
I feel car sick.
Do something, Ike. Do it quick. Watch the road! That's a mighty fine delivery you brought there.
I think it's great that this game breaks off from the action and gives the player a pause in the form of the shop screen, where they can spend as long as they like and just choose wisely what they want to spend. Of course, we only have 125 credits because we are only awarded $100 per race. So it is going to take quite a few races before we can afford all these great gadgets, and for now all we can do is check out these prices.
Yeah, we got the Spitback speed engine. It's solid, reliable, and fast. You boys need it? Our engine's sounding very funny. He's making lots of noises.
With each new race comes a new graphical environment, and you can see new hills on the horizon, and I think it's great that we have parallax hills and parallax clouds, and sometimes you might see the trackside markers and obstacles change as well, and so sometimes you might see brand new signs in the road. So this game is not a stock environment all the way through, and it does change from level to level, and of course the maps are different from level to level, but the gameplay does not change until you upgrade that vehicle. If we have a serious crash, the best thing to do is to gear down and preserve that engine. We only have the basic engine at the moment, and that won't take any kind of punishment whatsoever before it blows up. And so you can see that we are now in 4th place, and being taken by all those other drivers means we are now last, and apparently we are now 7th place. So you can see the field spread out in front of us, and you can see small jumps in the road break up some of the action, a little like Batman the movie. So the graphics on offer aren't bad quality, and they aren't top notch either, but they do the job, and they could have been a lot worse on the Amiga. I've seen a lot worse graphics games than this, with higher ratings. But it isn't the graphics, it is basically the frame rate, and as I say, with these weak engines on offer, we are basically running at minimum spec, and so that would put off the casual player having not upgraded the car. But we shall see some speed from this a little later, and for now all we can do is to ignore all the signs asking us to vote for Fat Sam the Sheriff.
Get a move on, boys. You're out of time, boys. Try again.
If we fail to make it to the checkpoint ahead of those guys, then we'll have to do it again, and I think you can probably get away with 1st, 2nd, maybe even 3rd without having to retry it, but usually 1st position is the best position to be in. The easiest way to gain 1st position is to have a great start, and every time you pass a vehicle you will hear a great sound effect, and that is one of the better sound effects in this game. I think the sound effects are pretty sparse, but they are enough to make this atmospheric. I like the engine start noise, but the sound of the actual engine in the actual gameplay isn't very meaty at this point, and the sound of overtaking drivers is actually louder than the noise that we can crank out of this tub. So let's get this box back to the end of that level, and as you can see by the map, it doesn't give us any indication how far we need to go, and the time limit is pretty ambiguous as well, so all we can do is to keep half an eye on the energy, and if we are in 1st, the cops. Bottom left corner we have an oil pressure reading, and that never changes throughout the entire game, so apparently we always have full oil. And in the bottom right corner you can see the gearbox, and above that we have a rough speedometer which gives us a rough idea when we're trying to get to top speed. And in this game, speed isn't the issue, it's simply staying alive and staying healthy in that thing, and hopefully we can nurse that to the finish. You can see stop signs on the road, but this is not Cisco Heat. We don't have to negotiate junctions, but you can see too many collisions and we come home second.
Glad you could make it, boys. Hope you've got my moonshine. Woodman V6 engine. Got real speed. Sure you boys can handle it? Billy Joe can handle it?
You bet.
That's real good tobacco. Special import, too. Yeah, I'm running low.
Now that we've been down to the shops and bought some more fags, well, I'm not quite sure what that will do to our driving ability. Maybe that gives us extra grip, but there must be some bonus to have that tobacco in this game. It's very rare to have tobacco in computer games, but it's surprising how many characters smoke. So continuing with this game, we seem to be wandering through a desert. We won't find many sand dunes here. No, this is not Lotus Turbo Challenge 2. This is definitely a game from 1991, and it was definitely released on Amiga. And as far as I know, this was actually a port of the Atari ST version, as is usually the case.
Boy, I wish I had a faster car.
If you crash that there motor again, I'll never get my precious moonshine. I think we need a new engine.
I think it's great that we have captions appearing on that screen, telling us some background information and giving us some anecdotes as well, but usually those characters give us a repeated pattern, and once you've read those, then they don't really vary too much. And that's just as well, because the eyes will certainly not be veering too far off this road, and you can't do that, otherwise you cannot drive in a straight line. So these voices I'm performing at the moment are kind of superfluous, because nobody will actually get to read what's printed on the screen whilst they're playing the game. And so let's just take those on board, and I think that's a nice touch. And just like Top Gear 2, those guys included speech bubbles and speech in their games. Before the advent of the CD, there wasn't much speech in the game, and perhaps speech in this game would have flashed it out just a bit more. You can see struggling over potholes is very difficult, and if you miss one jump, then you might be out. And again, if you crash too many times, then unfortunately you will be out. And I think you can crash 3 times over the duration of this game, i.e. get 2 continues, and after that then you have failed. So let's just see us making it just about to that stop, and now finally hopefully we can stop and buy ourselves a new engine. Unfortunately, we failed to finish in the top 3, and we finished 5th in that race. That means we do actually get to continue, but we don't gain any monetary reward for it. So, being broke at the moment, all we can do is to get back in the saddle and to ride off again with another load.
I reckon Billy Joe is sure in for a chase this time.
Moonshine Racers was developed by Peakstar Software and published by Millennium, and Millennium was a relatively new company when this was published in April 91. The code was created by a partnership, a long-time partnership on the Amiga scene. That was Peter J. Hickinson and Bill Count, and they both worked together on Chubby Gristle, the conversion onto the Amiga, published by Grand Slam in 1988. And Peter J. Hickinson and Bill Count also worked and coded the fabulous Chase HQ for Ocean in 1989 for the Amiga, and also converted Continental Circus, which fared quite so much better, and the Munsters they worked on together, which fared quite so much worse in 1989. Peter then moved on to Thunderstrike in 1990 and also coded Road Rash, which we've also seen in the top 50 racing games in 1991. Anyone who remembers seeing our Batman the Movie review may remember that the driving 3D sections were apparently based on Chase HQ, but what I forgot to mention was John O'Brien actually created that code for the ZX computer. So when John O'Brien found himself working for Ocean and creating the Batman the Movie road levels, he converted his driving mechanics from the ZX Spectrum into the Amiga version. That means Peter and Bill created Chase HQ on the Amiga from scratch, and that's why Chase HQ on the Amiga is not very good, and that's why Continental Circus isn't very good, and this is probably the best game that they created together. Finally, we have 100 in cash, and perhaps that is enough to upgrade our vehicle. There are at least 3 vehicles in this game, but we aren't going to get to see the pickup truck in this particular play guide, because that appears over the last few levels, and we gain an extra vehicle probably every 5 levels in this game, but the one that we're going to drive at the moment is the second vehicle, which looks more like a Zephyr with wings, and that's the one we're going to drive. So let's head on to Hazard Creek, and I think it's great that we are presented with a map at the beginning of each stage. Not that that map will help us during that stage, and even though there is a map on screen, that's pretty rudimentary, and again the player's eyes won't really be darting in that direction. They'll simply be looking ahead in that road and trying to anticipate every corner. Have our new red second-hand Cadillac, or whatever that may be, with the usual fins on the back, which went out of date at least 50 years ago. Now we can at least get some kind of speed out of this game, and it's great that crashing into those telephone poles won't stop us dead in the road. We can simply mow those down, and only the damage in this game really should be taken care of. So the easiest way to do that is to slow down and tiptoe around these levels, and now that we have some speed out of this vehicle, even though it is only some speed, it is still better than we got on the first level. And so we are in second position, and tiptoeing around is usually the best policy, because that means we can sneak through these traps on the floor, which look like piles of moss but actually could be anything from potholes to radar traps. And now you can see that we are losing time simply by failing to pick our way through those traps. If we leave the car to cool down, sometimes we can continue, and as I say, sometimes that is possible, and still win the race, as long as those guys are all bunched up. You can see it didn't really take us long to get into 4th position, and, well, sometimes you can be extremely unlucky plotting a route through this landscape, and having to wait for the engine to repair itself does take some time. The graphics in Moonshine Racers was created by Mark Edwards, and he again joined the same gang creating Continental Circus and converting that onto the Amiga, and again worked on Road Rash, creating the graphics for that as well, and F1 World Championship Edition. For DeMarc appeared in 1995, and he went on to create the graphics for Legends, which is an extremely well-made Zelda type of game, which appeared in 1996, which many regard as one of the best last hurrahs for the Amiga. And he then moved on to the GTA series, creating additional graphics for those, and he was last known heard of working at Sumo Digital, the Sheffield-based company which rose out of the ashes of Infogrames and Gremlin Graphics. He then created the graphics for Little Big Planet 3 in 2014. Even though you cannot hear any music, there is music in this game, available by pressing the F2 key or selecting that from the menu in the shop. And unfortunately we're not having too much music in this game. You find the music in the intro, and that's the same music that you get in the game. And so that kind of bluegrass and that kind of jingle was actually created by the maestro Richard Joseph, who you may remember created music for Cannon Fodder, Diggers, Robocod, Lure of the Temptress, Megalomania and Moonstone. I think the music is okay, but that does get repetitive being just the one track, and so for this example playthrough I'm actually choosing to use the sound effects, and the sound effects are a hit and miss affair. I like the starting and the overtaking, but the engine itself sounds pretty weak, and it does not really fit with all these cars because that is a stock sound all the way through. So this game does have a mixed bag. And that's why, as we shall see later on, the magazine reviewers certainly had a fun time trying to review this game.
The engine's on fire! Do something, Ike, and do it quick. Crash once more and you'll be fired. I think we need new engine. Watch the road!
On the Amiga, we are making our way through those levels, and we might get to see perhaps level 10 in this play guide. And as long as you choose the right upgrades and make every race first time, then this game is easy. And as you can see, I'm not wasting too much time getting through it. But those small mistakes turn into big disasters. And so this game is a small mistake, but it can turn into a big disaster when you make those very early on. And then you just end up switching off this game and have no patience for it. But there is some substance under the bonnet, and under the hood there is something worth playing, and it's better than some games that I'd like to mention, which I've reviewed already, and I've actually played this not very much. In fact, this is only the second time I've played this in my life. So the fact that we can get far with it is a great factor, and it doesn't take long to learn, although it does take some time to practice and master, and to obviously get first every time. I think that the graphical coding is adequate. I certainly like the clouds and the little details, and the backgrounds are drawn much better than they were in Super Hang-On, for example, with lots more detail in those backgrounds and lots more shaded sky effects. If only the road itself wasn't the usual banded affair, then this game may have risen to an extra special level, and if only this game didn't slip slide around, and the lack of in-game smoothness makes it feel slightly jerky. You may notice barrels are being dropped by our rivals as well, and if you crash into those, that will slow us down, and so our rivals determined to stop us from getting to this next checkpoint, which we managed to do by flying. I also like the detail in the bar, you can see, which is nicely drawn, and so it's those little details which drew me towards this game, and why it was nominated for the top 50 races on the Amiga of all time. But just like the first tip which I gave out, which is basically save all your cash for something which is worthwhile, that is precisely what we are doing as we move on to the Bottleneck Canyon. And these names are amazing. Unfortunately, the compass doesn't give us a great idea of what we are to face, but you can see that this is more or less the Nevada desert, and just like Star Trek, we'll have to mingle our way through those canyons and head towards the finish somewhere on the other side. You can see the sky texture yet again from level to level does change, and the background colours and things like that, and even the trees and the cacti start to appear on this level, so it really did have the hallmarks of a game which could have been absolutely great. It's just that there are too many clunky aspects about this game, and it only really speeds up when you get hit from behind and you have to travel at full speed in case you get blown up. But we have got blown up in this case. This is the opposite to Chase HQ. We actually have to avoid the cops, and they are still waiting to take us down just like that as soon as we set off again. So sometimes this game does play a little unfairly, unless you can have the greatest start and use the ramps to get out of trouble. The other major problem with this game is simply the grip level that we seem to have. Even though we've bought both of those tyres and we have an upgraded vehicle, we are still slip sliding along that road like our tyres are made from pure oil skidding on pure sheet glass. And at the moment that is very difficult to drive this car, and it's just as hard to drive this car as it was driving the tank that we got on the very first level. So trucks and fast speed cars really don't make much difference to the driving model. I still slip slides around like we are on a frozen lake. Let's hope once again that we actually have enough cash to be able to spend it, and with 225 whole credits in the bank, what can we afford? Well, the turbo would be great, and the turbocharger would be great, but I'm actually choosing, hopefully, to buy the extra engine block, and that should convert our engine and turn that into a V8. And that V8 power is noticeable in the game, but it's not so noticeable that you really have to use that. And it looks like we did not actually buy the actual complete engine block, we went for the turbo instead. So yes, those little things do build up in the game and they are noticeable to the driver's handling, but at the same time not incredibly noticeable, not like buying upgrades for Supercars 2 and other games where we could upgrade, just like Crazy Cars 3. Even though we have the turbocharger, we'll still have to figure skate around all those obstacles, and that is almost impossible sometimes, even if you choose the perfect line. And if you are skidding and sliding at that very same time, then that really is impossible. And look at that, we gain overhead barriers a little like Vroom, but unlike Vroom, this game only runs at maybe 10% of that speed. You can see in the background we have a nice vineyard and a selection of trees and buildings which make us look like that we're travelling through a kind of area. And this is yet another new area that we've managed to find, a semi-desert rural landscape.
Give in, Billy Joe, before I shove your hide off the road.
Them boys are making a right mess, Pa.
You can see in this level that some of the trees look like they are autumn trees, and sometimes it looks like we are moving through seasons, through summer and autumn and winter, and so fast season changes maybe make sure that this is driven across the whole year instead of just for a season. But I really do like those touches, and here we go back to the green trees again, and back to the weaving in and out of barriers.
Maybe you better patrol the road for Moonshine, Pa.
Moving on to those scores, Amiga Action had a relatively high score for this originally at 73%, but for the reissue they only gave this 15%, saying that the game was slow and tedious. CU Amiga similarly gave this 60% on the first initial release, and they lowered that to 37% by the time of the reissue, complaining again that it was slow and jerky. Amiga Power gave this originally and completely 40%, Dato Magazine gave this 55%, Generation 4 gave it 71%, Amiga Format gave this game 79%, and the One Amiga gave Moonshine Racers 84%. The current Lemon Amiga score is actually 46%, and if you add all those numbers up and divide them, that comes out with a mean average of 5.5 out of 10. You can see on the Amiga the very final level I'll be showing you, because we won't be getting any further than this, and there are at least 5 more levels still to go. between here and the end of the game, but we won't be getting to see those either. You can see some kind of Monument Valley effect with the rocks in the background, and you can see that that red effect is mirrored in the sky and on the landscape as well. But if you don't have many continues by this point in the game, you will find it hard, and even though I'm trying to continue, trying to catch up to those other racers at this stage really is hard if you haven't got all those upgrades. And I think we may even collect a new car if we manage to make it to the next level, and that means that we really can get some speed out of this engine and try to go full speed, but again we won't be seeing that particular fact on this playthrough. So it is a mixed bag. Certainly got some charm in this game, and it's certainly got some appeal for racers who like a bit of a story behind their games. The graphics are better than reasonable, and the sound effects are quite good. The music is sometimes a letdown and quite repetitive, but there are just as much to like as not like in this game, and surprisingly I consider this a lot better than the official Outrun game that we got on the Amiga, and I actually find that this is even faster and smoother than the official Outrun on the Amiga 500. After our period moonshining runs to an end, then we get to enter our name on the high score table along with our highest score, and you can see it saves up to 10 of those onto the disc of this WHD load version. The original game came on 2 discs, and as I say, quite a mixed bag of opinions. It feels slightly rushed and half finished, and this really could have been a great game. It also puts me off that there are no titles in the title sequence, and I had to make those up. And perhaps the voice sound effects as well are a little bit lacking, but there's nothing that they could do with that being on 2 discs. So it's a mixed opinion and it's a mixed bag, but I actually think that this is a good game at 5.5 out of 10, and I'd rather play this anytime, any day of the week, rather than chase HQ. Thank you for viewing another Lemon Amiga play guide and review. See you soon in the next one. Thank you.